All right. Well, my name is Tucker. I am part of the At Least I'm Rich team. I worked as a game designer, systems designer, and blueprint programmer. So basically programming, except I did all the lame stuff. So I've got a little presentation to share. Um, I'm going to share this screen. Okay. So are we live? Yep. Okay, great. So I'm just going to kind of talk about some of our mechanics and how they kind of relate to the theme. So first, I'm going to sort of share like how the game works. So At Least I'm Rich is a competitive card game. So the players assume the role of these like rich adventure capitalist CEO type people. They're just trying to expand their corporate empire. They want to make as much money as possible over the course of 12 rounds of gameplay. It's a digital game downloadable on Windows PC. So this is an example of a structure card. It's like the catalyst for the game. So the goal of the game is to generate as much profit as possible. To do this, players will play structure cards on their turn. So structure cards, when they're played, they go in front of the player and they last for the entire game. And they have the following properties. So they have a profit, which is my mouse captured? It is.
Yes.
Okay. So it's like going to be this number right here. So the profit is how much points they score the player. It has a yield time. That's basically how many rounds go by before the card scores the player that much money. And then it also has an impact, which is how much damage that card does to the environment. So this card, as an example, every 1 round, this card is going to gain the player 2 profit and do 1 damage to the environment. It also has an ability. They also have a type, which is like their classification. You can kind of think of it as like a Pokemon energy type, sort of. So they can either be agriculture, automotive, or tech. This is a tech card. Some additional things worth noting. The environment has a random number of health that is a hidden health bar. That health bar, if it ever reaches 0, it's destroyed. The game immediately ends, even if they haven't played through the full 12 rounds. If that happens, then money doesn't matter anymore, and that's not the win condition. The new win condition becomes whoever did the least amount of damage wins. So it kind of creates this shoot the moon mechanic where you want to make as much money, make as much money, make as much money. But if you do too much, then that doesn't matter anymore, and you really should have pulled back. Um, Players are also assigned a secret role at the beginning of the game. This can kind of give them an alternative strategy. These roles have like a motive. So, for example, the vegan role has the motive finish the game without any agriculture structures built, and then they can gain bonus profit for doing that. And then in addition to structure cards, there's also action cards, which offer a more passive style. So some action cards might heal the environment or reduce the amount of impact you do on a turn. So I'm just going to give you guys a look at what the gameplay looks like. So yeah, this is the title screen. And then if I hit play, first I got to draw my roll card. So I'm going to be the demolition enthusiast this game. So my goal is to be the player who demolishes the most structures. Okay, so then the game has 12 rounds. Each round has 4 phases. Right now it's the draw phase. So everyone's going to take a turn drawing the card. I'm going to go ahead and draw a structure card. You can also right-click cards to kind of do an expanded view, and it will give you this kind of info block talking about the real-world effects of the card. Our narrative designer did a really good job. She spent several days doing research on every single card, and they're all like sourced, and there's also a list of sources in the credits for the game. So after the draw phase is the select phase. Everyone selects a card. So I'm going to play fast food chain because it gives me a lot of profit and yields pretty quickly. So you just play the card, and then all the AIs are going to take a turn, and then it goes into the yield phase. So any card that has a yield time of 1 will yield instantly. Any card that has a yield time of 2 or 3, their yield will go down by 1. So if it has a yield time of 2, it won't yield this turn, but it will yield next turn. And then it just does the cleanup phase, and the gameplay continues for 12 rounds. If the environment starts taking more damage, we created this audio health bar system where the music for the game has a bunch of tracks. Simi, our audio designer, made 3 basically families of music. And so as the environment's health kind of goes down and reaches new thresholds, it'll swap out a positive sounding track like birds chirping or rivers with negative tracks that are like machines whirring and radio static. The background also will start to develop a grunge layer to kind of signify to the player that they're running out of time. We wanted to have both audio and visual feedback for accessibility reasons. But yeah, that's kind of the gameplay. I'm just gonna real quick talk about some of the intentionality behind that.
Actually,
Um,
we have to move on to the next section, but
oh yeah, that's fine.
if any of the information from the next one can come up as like a reply to something the mentors say, that
Yeah,
totally
for sure,
welcome.
that's not a
But
problem.
please end your screen share.
Sounds good. There it is.
Yeah, this is so cool, incredibly cool game. Um, I would love to ask actually about that very specific thing you were about to go into. The intentionality of this. It seems like there's some big twists in this. If you're told that the profit is all that matters, but then the environment gets destroyed, right?
For sure. So that actually, kind of that mindset, really came from like the placeholder name that we put on the project, which was At Least I'm Rich. That was just the name I put down on the first documentation. And that kind of mindset, like we thought it was just a placeholder name, but it sort of developed into the tone of the game completely. Like it starts to get this kind of like sarcastic, oh, you thought like we got you tone. So yeah, about kind of the intentionality there. So the theme of this jam is climate change, and the sub theme is changing the story. And so we wanted to take kind of a more abstract approach to that. So the way the gameplay loop works with this kind of Dominion style, like engine building, you want to throw down as much cards as possible. And once you get to like round 6, you've got cards activating cards, giving bonuses to other cards, letting you yield extra cards early. And you have this whole chain of events that's like super satisfying. Our audio designer like really went all out with making the sound effects look cool, and we have cool effects that come off of the cards. And spoiler alert, you can't win the game by doing that. We specifically gave the environment a calculated amount of health where it will get destroyed usually around late round 10, early round 11. So changing the story, we took that as you can't play the game in the way that you think you're supposed to. You kind of have to go against the like 4x gamer mindset where you just want to like make the money and let the dopamine like hit you. You have to lay back and just play like action cards. I'm going to heal the environment this turn. You know, I've got like a structure, and it like my turn seems super lame compared to everyone else's. But then, you know, the environment gets destroyed around 10. You're like, okay, guys, well, I won. So was it worth it? At least you're rich, right? So yeah,
Cool. I love that. Yeah, that's such a sort of subversive twist there that like, yeah. You sort of wonder sometimes whether games are equipped to handle a theme like climate change, right? Where we do really have to completely stop using fossil fuels, right? But I love this take. That's just super cool. Yeah, way to kind of like rethink everything from the beginning almost, right?
right. And yeah, that's kind of what it is. Is I like when we came up with the pitch for the game, we were like, okay, what are the inherent game mechanics to climate science? Like what actually exists? How does like neo-Western capitalism, what's the game design there? And it really is, let's just make as much money as possible and hope that it doesn't destroy the planet, because that would kind of suck, right? Like
I was gonna
Yeah.
say like this. First of all, it looks spectacular, and the way that it designed, like mechanically, I think is also pretty genius. Like it's approachable, but it's also like just like unique enough to make it people like want to do that standard 4x min maxing kind of thing that gamers obviously want to do. But
right.
the thing that I kept thinking of is that this feels like a Brenda Romero game. She made this set of games and wrote a book about it called The Mechanic is the Message. And your game is perfectly falling into that bucket where, you're presenting a game, where traditionally you want to win all the points or whatever. But in this point, the message is that like if you do that, everyone dies, like the whole the environment dies. And I think that that's like a beautiful way to tell the message by like suddenly gut punching in round 10 or whatever, be like
Right.
you like lost because you all got greedy and you couldn't help yourselves. Because doing that, I imagine if I was a crazy big CEO of like a McDonald's or whatever, and I kept seeing the numbers roll up, it probably feels just the same way as a gamer is like stacking up points and like racking up all these bonuses and stuff. You can't help yourselves. And at what point do you tell yourself, like, is this enough? Is this good? You know, where is the line? And I think that that is the beauty of this game, is that it's just got this subversiveness to it, but it's built into the game, and so everybody learns a hard lesson, hopefully, once the environment is destroyed. Like, surprise, it's dead now. When they were so close to getting to the last
Right.
round, but yet still failed. So, yeah, I think this is something that I think is a very unique and very special game. Plus, can I just shout out the art and everything? Like, it's
Yeah,
really
yeah.
just very stunning. And
Our art team just really did a phenomenal job. As Hannah and Liv both
I mean,
did
this feels
great.
like it could be a commercial game like right now, like based on what I've seen. So that's impressive. Like,
We
so
really appreciate that.
all of the team compliments. But no, the best part is the whole, you're building the message into the mechanics, and I've only really seen Brenda do it as amazingly as this. So
That's huge. We really appreciate that.
yeah, go look up that book if you haven't heard of it.
I will. That's why I'm here. This is why I do game design, is stuff like that. So I definitely will look into that further.
Yep, cool.
We
That's
have
all I
a
have to
little
say.
more time to talk about the game, the mechanics, anything that comes up. And meanwhile, if anyone has questions or comments, please post in the chat.
One of the things that I find really interesting about your game is it, in a sense, combines two design practices that we see as being impactful for serious games that we outline actually in the environmental game design playbook that the IGDA Climate Sig published a couple years ago. One of those is a no-win scenario. So throwing something players' ways that like they think they're able to win, but they find that they're unable um, to win by playing the game in the way that they think the game is intended to be played. And the other design tactic that you're using is a new goal orientation. So suddenly throwing a new goal players' ways of, oh, this is no longer your win condition. The win condition is actually this. I think that just from a from a an interactive storytelling perspective, that's something that we've seen is really effective. One suggestion I might have on that same train of thought is, and I'm curious if you thought about this at all, but we also have seen that it's helpful with new goal orientation to let players sit with that new goal for a little while instead of it just being a, hey, your goal has changed and now you've lost. Have it be, hey, your goal has changed. Now do something about it.
Yeah, for
I could
sure.
see that being really effective in like at round 10 or 11. Suddenly the player with the least amount of score or the least amount of impact on the environment is the winner. If players have a couple more rounds that they can play, they can try to scramble last minute to try to reduce their impact to win. I think that's something that would let players just kind of sit with that reality of what they've caused for a couple more rounds instead of immediately moving on to the next game.
For sure. And that's something we try to capture with the kind of feedback in the both audio and visual like environment. Like watching it gets pretty dark and gritty once the environment reaches about 10% health. So that's like you're saying, like trying to signal to players that like, hey,
Mm.
this isn't sustainable. You're probably not going to make it. And actually, we also have the AI in their flowchart. Depending on what role card they're assigned, they get a different variable that we call the OSR, which stands for the oh shoot round, where they realize that the environment is not sustainable and their primary strategy will divert into searching for healing action cards and start trying to play those instead. Um, Actually, the only
Mm.
AI that does not have that feature is if they get the rule that's called Scorched Earth, which their secret motive is they win if they do destroy the environment. So they're the only AI without that feature.
Wow.
Uh,
That's cool to hear about that scramble round.
Yeah.
I think that's really great. One thing I'm curious about as well is and Parker, hopefully we have time for one more question.
Ask your question. We need to keep it tight though.
All right, super tight question. I know you mentioned that this is really abstract. I was wondering if like what your thought process was behind making this game abstract and not necessarily like you show the degradation of the environment in an abstract sense, but not necessarily human impacts of that. So I was wondering what your thinking was behind that.
So actually, in the very first like orientation Zoom, I think the only thing I said in the whole conversation was, "Is it okay if we abstract?" Because I think that's a very important thing in the design process, especially when you're like given a theme to work from. Um, Even when you have a theme and a sub theme, because sometimes it can create for a lot more like engaging and thought-provoking content. I kind of like to think of it as like a Christopher Nolan movie where for the first 2 hours you're like, what does this have to do with? Oh, those are like my favorite kind of movies. And so that's kind of why we tried to go with something that was like you set it up for like, this is just Monopoly. I don't get it. And then once you get it, it's so much more impactful that way. So I hope that answers the question.
All
I
right.
see.
I'm just
Yeah,
gonna
I can see your train of thought there. Thanks.
I'm just gonna read some of these comments real quick. Uh, Micah says, "Love the research details." Kara says the UX and UI are on point.
That was CC.
Uh,
Are you an XUI designer?
Oh, yes. uh, let's see.
There's one
Carl,
question of will there be local multiplayer or online multiplayer?
So that was the original concept. That was
Yeah,
probably the biggest development. Like, oh my God, what are we doing? In our original pitch, it was an online multiplayer game, and
yeah,
it was 2 hours before we submitted our ideation sprint that our lead programmer Evan was like, "Hey guys, I just did research on online multiplayer. It will probably triple our work that we have to do. So maybe we should do a different game." And I'm like, "What?" We just like, okay, let's. We had like an emergency. It's like an Among Us emergency meeting. We're like, okay, wait. And ultimately we decided to do AI because although making AI for like board games can be really complicated, at the end of the day, there's two decisions, which is what card am I going to play and what card am I going to draw? And so even if those are really, really complicated decisions, we can work with that. So if we were to take our game now and add online multiplayer, it would be like a code rewrite. So
yeah.
maybe a local multiplayer would be a little bit more tough because then all of the secret elements would have to be revealed because if you're all sitting around the same TV, you'll know what's in everybody's hand and what their role is and stuff like that.
one more question that kind of relates to this from Twitch, from Little Spike 15. Do you plan on making a tabletop version of this in the future?
We would love to make a tabletop version of this in the future. I can't say like, yes, we are going to do that because obviously then we have to look into like, where are we gonna source and print cards? And also in order to not be like, backhanded people, they would also have to be like environmentally like they got to be like recycled cards. So it's like we would need to look into getting like pretty high quality like production for that, and we're all super poor. So maybe.
I'm sorry, but we do need to move on to the next game. Thank you so much,
For sure.
Tucker.
Thank you all.
Yeah, thanks, Tucker. Yeah,
All
congratulations.
right, next up is